someone who did about 15 years as a technical recruiter before I moved into the world of online communities, I've always thought a lot about the future of work and the nature of the work that we do and how digital platforms intersect with all of that. That's the topic of our conversation today with SJ Barakony. And it's going to be a wild one. We're going to be getting into thinking about the future state of things, about where we are right now and the gap that's in between. Kalisa, let's roll the opening. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you may happen to be. You've tuned in to Talk About Your Community, a semi-weekly live stream where we talk about the world of online community building, how it intersects with offline meetings and communities, the technologies we use, the sociology, the psychology, the astronomy behind building meaningful, thriving, connected spaces with a digital intermediation built in. If you're here for the first time, this is a casual chat style talk show where we bring in a variety of different people from different disciplines and idea areas. I love getting questions from the people who are attending on the chat. So please don't feel shy about chiming in with questions or ideas or responses as we go through this. And we'll definitely try to get as many questions in on screen as possible. My guest today is a gentleman that I met earlier, maybe a month or two ago, through the Community Consultants Collective. Mr. SJ Barakony, education Sherpa, super connector, futurist, thought leader, economic historian. I love that one. We've had a couple of really great conversations offline and through our professional associations. And I just wanted you as a guest on the show because I love your orientation and your way of thinking about things. And I just knew it was going to be a fun conversation to bring you in. SJ, welcome. Great to see you.
Thank you so much for the invitation and for the kind words. And it's my goal to live up to a mantra of mine that I've had for many years now: serve, solve, and share.
I really love that orientation. I think it's wonderful. And SJ, I know we met through the Community Consultants Collective, an organization we both belong to, which is dedicated to people on an independent path. I know you're an independent. You shared before we got on the stream here today that you are I think you used a slightly different term, but I termed it as digital nomad. You move about and live your life independently and minimalistically. I think you termed it. But tell me a little bit about your work that you do. What is a futurist? How is that impacting the work that you bring to communities around entrepreneurship? Would love to hear a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Many years ago, Todd, I learned from Jim Collins that there's a lot of value in zooming out and zooming in, zooming out, zooming in. So I'm going to do my best to live up to that type of orientation with describing and answering the question, because there's different pieces to that. So let's start at a very higher level or on the outside of a bunch of circles, right? Concentric circles. I believe that I am not only a historian, especially economic, as you noted there, and that is something that I do include in my professional brand, but I also believe that I'm a futurist. And yes, they can both coexist at the same time. This is not a binary. This is not a duopoly, okay? Intellectual thought does not have silos when it's in its purest form. When you start siloing it down and become a credentialist and start to go into what I refer to and others as expertitis, that's when you start to put artificial walls up between knowledge and interconnectivity. So I do not do that at all. I'm a generalist and I'm proud of it. Okay. So historian and futurist, that's on the outside of the circle. Okay. Now going in a little deeper, I like to say, without getting too lost in the weeds. Okay. So pretend we have a green field, Todd. We don't want to have a lot of flowers and daisies and dandelions, right? On the green field level, I like to say that I am involved in three particular things. Okay. Each of them includes an element of futurism, and in some cases, historian comes in as well. So in no particular order, the first is my work. My ultimate calling, vocation, is the education Sherpa. That is my lead part of my branding and has now for several years. During the first 18 or so months of the C19 era, I shifted into the Sherpa because I saw that the world was in upheaval. And what is a Sherpa? Well, look it up yourself on your own, folks. But one way you can define it is as a guide. And I felt like I had the skill set, the gift set of being a guide. So that's when I shifted my branding away from being just a solutions provider in education to being a guide.
And I think in particular, SJ, when I think about the Sherpa, this is the person who's not just a guide, but the person that keeps you from falling off the mountainside.
There's a lot of truth to that. And of course, interject along the way, because there are things that even I don't have 360-degree vision around my entire head, right? 3D, 4D, right? So if you see something or whatever, absolutely just let that drop in, because this is an evolution of myself as a professional. I haven't uncovered everything. I may never uncover everything. So that's the first part, is the Sherpa, and that can work B2B for organizations, workplaces, if you will, communities. It can also work B2C for families and individual people. Okay. I even ended up with, as I've evolved over the years, 5 different solutions, and I call them now, imagine that, Sherpa solutions.
Love it.
Okay. Then the next piece is, and we'll talk maybe a little more about this later, because I can point some people there if you want to explore this, is one of my virtual digital communities I'm a part of. I also do fractional work for it. And I know, Todd, you and I are quite familiar with the difference between fractional and freelancer and consultant, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe we explore that today. Maybe we explore it a different time. Maybe you explore it with a different guest. But I am, for this community, definitely fit as a fractional, because I am embedded in the community. I have my own email address, yada, yada, yada. So that is my second thing. And I do bring futurism into it, as well as I am the unofficial historian. So when people join this community, it's a paid membership community. I sometimes am saying, well, hey, I've been a part of it for almost 9 years, but did you know it's been around for 16? Yada, yada, yada. So there's the historian piece. And then I also keep my futurist bent when I'm talking about my Sherpa work inside of this community. Okay. Mm-hmm. So this is where I have to wear 2 hats, and I have to literally be removing them, going back and forth, because I'm in the community as the education Sherpa, but I also do fractional work for the community. Okay. Mm-hmm. Then third and last is, I believe that any community, and now we're sort of talking more offline communities just for a moment, your locality. So if you're in America, it might be a county, it might be a village, it might be a city or a town. If you're elsewhere in the world, convert it to your normal way of speaking, a province, a township, a federated district, whatever you call it. But either way, when you have a lot of startup activity, entrepreneurial energy that's been unleashed, you can call it lifestyle businesses, or you can call it a startup. Oftentimes they get confused. But lifestyle businesses tend to be one, maybe two people, and it tends to be more self-employment. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Startups tend to be born, and they are born with the desire, the vision to grow and scale, right? So I am involved in both sides of that, but my one contract specifically is meant to help startups, but sometimes the startups end up staying as lifestyle businesses. But either way, they're part of the community, they're part of the locality, and the energy that comes from them is a really big deal, because not all of them are going to be successful, but please do not use those same old tired terms. 90% fail, 72% fail. Of course, because failure is a part of success. Okay. So I am all set with that. Those are the three rings as I zoomed in. But on the outer ring again, futurism and historian are not butting heads. They do work together. So thank you for the opportunity to share all that. And I really appreciate, again, being here with you on the live stream.
The feeling is entirely mutual, SJ. The thing that strikes me, from your self-description, that three-part identity that you were describing is, one is a large part of your orientation is, and maybe forgive the term, but you're the sort of an evangelizer, helping to frame understanding, helping to spread understanding of entrepreneurship and of the work that you do, and helping people to put things into context. And I think that orientation as both a historian and as a futurist feed into that energy that you have. And the other thing that I reacted to that you said was, I think we share that passion for locality. The place where I live, the town, the city of Two Rivers, Wisconsin, where I'm based, has a burgeoning ecosystem of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship. And I'm involved with the county economic development group that's doing that, trying to nurture those connections and help them come together. We're trying to talk about building a tech incubator in our space here, because not only do we have beautiful views and a lot of wonderful outdoor, natural space that's gorgeous, but we've also got pretty good internet here too. So it's a great place for people to be a digital nomad and sort of just be in a beautiful space, as opposed to being in the middle of an ugly downtown, area where I think a lot of people, think about, I'm not slagging on downtowns. I lived and worked in Milwaukee and Chicago for many years, but it's just not quite as nice as being out in nature and enjoying that small town life in some ways. I am perhaps a little bit biased about that, but anyways, great orientation. I appreciate that. I'm wondering if I could ask you to talk a little bit more about how you think of the role of the futurist, because it's an area that's been of interest to me for many years. I don't bill myself as a futurist, but I am very interested in that role. Some people will term it future foresight as a discipline, because I feel like maybe they feel like some hair has gotten attached to the title of futurist, as somebody who's this master prognosticator or a prophet, saying these things will happen, within the next 5 years. There's some dangers and associations that go along with that idea of futurism and futurists, that maybe there's some notions that people need to be disabused of as we enter into this conversation. I'm wondering if you, maybe in your own words, could talk a little bit about how you reflect on that idea of being a futurist yourself.
Very astute. And I think one way to start off by the first part of the answer is, I don't think there's any one definition. I think I have some affinity for the Latin language, but I do not speak it. nor was I a classics major or course of study in my university years. But the root of poly is many, right? So many definitions of futurist. So I'm going to give you mine, and of course it has evolved some, and I'm sure it will continue to. Because I think the world right now, and this is where I can marry the futurism and the historian and fuse them together. I think the world right now is repeating a cycle that happens every century or so. Could be as few as 50 years, could be 70, but it repeats cycles. And the cycle I think we're in is one of major disruption. And I think the last time we went through this, you can arguably say was in the roughly 15 to 20 years, starting with the beginning of the Great Depression through the end of World War II, which was roughly 16 years. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I believe we entered this, some would say we entered it around the time of the Great Recession or the mild depression we had in 08, 09. And if that's the case, we would be coming up on the end. This is going to be discussed by historians for years, and we'd be here for hours attempting to decipher that. So I'm going to pull back from that and just say that I believe we are in an age of disruption. And there are plenty of historical precedent. That's where I'm going to leave this for now. But for anyone who would like to talk more about this, you are in my wheelhouse, contact me. Okay. Futurist. I believe that one solid definition that I've anchored myself to for the most part is there's a mountain in front of you. So close your eyes, draw a picture, whatever. There's a mountain in front of you and you're on the ground level. You're on the terra firma. You see a mountain. It seems like, oh my goodness, how am I going to get past it? Because I know that my ultimate destination lies past it. So the futurist, the orientation, the mindset is I am going to get past this, but it's not any one way. I will find a way that aligns with my skills, my gifts, my current knowledge base, and or I'm going to learn on the fly just in time. So you might say, I have the skill to climb over the mountain at near or at its peak. Fantastic. You're going to get to your vision. You're going to get to your ultimate destination that way. Some might say, I'm going to burrow right through this mountain. I know how to mine. I know how to dig. Fantastic. Another person will say, there's got to be a way around it. I am going to go divert off to the left or right, and I'm going to divert around it. Or some might say, you know what, there's probably some sort of crevice in between some of these ridges. I'm going to look for it, and I'm going to go through that. The futurist says that the mountain is the crises, the chaos, the disorder, the challenges, the obstacles, the roadblocks, pick your terms. That's the mountain. The futurist says, I'm going to get there. So that's how I would define it. And I think it's very apropos through my eyes, based again on the fact that we're going through a historical cycle of major disruption in workplaces, households, political systems, and many, many other things.
It's an interesting comparison, harkening back to that. You talked about the century crisis, that we look at. If we look back to the stock market crash of 29 and, through the years of the Depression, through World War II, the political, the economic, the social upheavals that occurred during those times, flirtation, more than a flirtation, authoritarian governments, kind of coming into play quite a lot. We're seeing a lot of those same trends play out today, it feels like. And in terms of work, or the way that the world of work has changed, it's interesting, the pressures on labor And I'm certainly no historian of the Depression or World War II period. I have some passing, knowledge about the time, but I think about as men went off to war, women entered the workplace and did factory work and did all kinds of work that were men's roles at the time, and that led to, after the war, women demanding to stay in that workplace setting and to have their own professional careers eventually. As I think about the pressures that we've been under here, whether from 2008 onwards, but I think more specifically of the pandemic as a crisis experience and what we've had, the things that have happened in terms of the work world now that I feel like we're reacting to is people suddenly needing to work from home or work, more to the point, from anywhere. And having that digital nomad, as with a theme that we opened up with. I as a professional want to be able to work from a cafe or from my comfy couch or from the office if I want to. That pressure coming up against employers who now that we're past the pandemic, and we can argue that point, are thinking about the rent that they're paying for a facility, or feeling maybe not accurately, maybe not with any data-driven understanding of it, like that, hey, I get more out of my workers if they're back in the office, and mandating that they come back. All of those pressures resulting in movements like quiet quitting, or people just kind of deciding that they want to drop out, or even, as we talked about earlier, the fractional movement, where people are deciding, like, you know what, I don't want to work for your enterprise anymore, but you can hire me as a part-time person in your organization to be a leader for your space. I mean, there's a lot happening with the world of work right now. And I'm using this as a little bit of a segue so we can get into the conversations about communities and community platforms and collaboration spaces. But I've said a lot of things. I don't know if there's anything you want to reflect on or think about.
Yes. And again, the joy of this kind of conversation is you can pull on any of the threads. And especially if you are in a household, or if you happen to be in the hospitality industry, you all will relate to this. You've heard of thread count sheets, right? The higher level ones are 2,000 thread count. And again, I think that's the case. Let's just pretend it is. Lower end is maybe 200-300. Either way, with these kind of conversations, you're pulling a thread out. And if you're on the higher thread count sheets, we can have literally 2,000 nano conversations, because each of these little things can be broken into smaller things, and it all comprises a greater whole. So I am only going to be able, by the necessity of time, to hit this at a very high level. But again, I will encourage that I'm always glad to do what I refer to as brainstorming or meet and greets. I don't call them calls, because that makes them mundane and it sounds like they're pedantic and boring. I don't call them that. I call them meet and greets or brainstorming. Okay. So here's a few things to brainstorm or think about on your own, and or to talk with me about. First, the whole nature of what it means to work has changed and is continuing to change. So my advice to folks out there who think that the rubber band is just going to go right back to the way it was circa January 2020, roughly, or even if you say that this era began during the Great Recession, mild depression. Again, this will be discussed, like I said earlier, for years, and there's probably books already out there that I haven't even read yet. But suffice to say, regardless of when you see it as the origination point, we're not done yet, and it's not going to bounce back, because all of these various evolution, revolution, transformations have happened. Broadband internet became ubiquitous. Mobile apps. The ability, or I'm sorry, I forgot this one. I almost shouldn't, because I am a part of a community like this. Co-working, right? get a membership, work at a place where there's other entrepreneurial-minded people, or its sister or brother is an incubator or an accelerator, right? Let alone the cafe, the library, these all are all over the place, depending on where you happen to be or where you plan to be if you're more nomadic, or even if you just do straight business travel and come back to a home, right? All this stuff's changing. Corporate real estate is going to have to adjust. Bankers are going to have to adjust. Okay. Hiding behind mandates and say you have to come back to the office, but we're not going to tell you really why we want you back. We just want you back. And we're hoping that you buy it because it's driven by compliance, fear, anxiety. We're not going to give you a promotion, whatever. That's just going to reinvigorate the quiet quitting, great resignation. Is that what a workplace really wants? Is that what your organization really wants? Do you want to reinvigorate that which happened for about roughly 18 months over the roughly 2021-22 era? Do you really want that to happen to your organization where your talent pool literally evaporates as if you put water out in some 90-degree temperature, right? And it just evaporates quickly. Is that really what you want with your talent pool? I don't think you do. It's just you haven't adjusted your mindset. Okay. It's not 1977 anymore. Okay. Mm-hmm. It's not 1994 anymore when the internet was just a little toddler for the masses, right? Okay. Those remember Netscape, CompuServe, GeoCities? I do, right? You couldn't have worked from home easily back then. Now, could you? Yes, some people did, but it was not anywhere close to a mainstream thing. So these are changes that have already happened, will continue to happen. And if you're standing in front, you're acting like the mountain, the futurists, the early adopters are going to just go over, around, through, and they're going to say, there's a much better thing on the other side. Okay. And eventually the mainstream will also see that too. And it's already happening. Certain organizations, Todd, that came up with mandates got pushback. And I'm cheering for those people because it's like, tell them the truth. Why do you want them back? Oh, it's because my bank balance sheet, the loan that I got, says that I have to have all this square footage. Well, how about do some negotiation and let's redeploy some of the space for childcare on site or whatever. We could talk about this all day, but like I said, I'm going to have to truncate my own comments because we would be here all day. So with that said, that's some thoughts that I have on that particular multi-piece topic.
Yeah. Well, as you're saying those things, that leverage that some organizations are trying to take advantage of or think that they can take advantage of by mandating that people come back to the office to work, I think they don't have as much leverage as they thought they did in a lot of cases because, as you said, their talent pools evaporate because particularly in the United States, if I think about like my reason to be a part of a company is one, at least sort of the implied reason is, well, there's a little more permanence to it, which is a complete lie because there's no such thing as permanent employment with an organization. And secondly, that I can get some kind of healthcare or insurance or benefits, which increasingly I can do that on my own. I can go buy those things. I'm not getting a deal, even from the biggest corporate organizations. Most of them, to be frank, their healthcare is terrible. That you're still going to be bankrupted if you have a major health issue that occurs to you. So it comes down to, what is a full-time corporate position actually getting you at the end of the day? I see a bright shiny hook with no worm on the end of it.
Very true. And again, we don't have the time bandwidth today, Todd, to get into everything, but I'm going to say this. I think one of the things, especially if you are of a certain generation or a certain age band, you get hung up on, and also, of course, dependence, which I freely admit I have no dependence. So I get that. So if you are in this audience live or in the future on a replay, and you have 2, 3, 6 dependents, I totally get that there's a little bit more of a risk-reward trade-off. I get that. Let alone the fact, and let me back up just briefly, Todd, I don't want this to come across as one of those things, especially since this is a part of the disruption we're facing right now, is some are calling it, and I'm coming at this from the civic side because I cannot stand politics, so there's no politics here, I promise, is from the civic side, engagement with your state or provincial level, again, or substitute whatever your governance unit is. Engagement, civic engagement, right? County, township, village government, all the way up to national or even global, supranational, right? There is a lot of talk these days about populism versus elitism. So let me be clear. If you are in a profession, industry sector where you must, by the nature of the product or service you're providing, must be at a so-called third-party location in order to deliver it, I am not talking down to you or saying that there's something wrong with that. Okay? If you're servicing a car, it's going to be a little hard to do it at your house.
Of course.
Now, there are, by the way, mobile oil change services and such, but if it's like a full-blown fix, probably
bring
not.
in the job. Sure, right.
Right.
Or
if you're getting your hair cut, that's an example which is starting to shift too. I know a few people that I've met over the years who do hair cutting at home. Okay. So bottom line is if you are in that profession, a profession like that, I am not attempting to do the populist elitism wedge, or some would call it the laptop class. No. So that is one piece of this. Okay. The other piece of this is just to say that agency and autonomy matter to a lot of people, whether they realize it or not. So why would you stand in the way of that? If it's a trust issue, you got to get the two components of trust and get them out there and work on them between the hiring party and the so-called hiree, whether it's classic employment or whether it's fractional, freelance, consultant, whatever. And the two components of trust that I learned years ago from one of my mentors is your character and your competence. So if there's concerns about character from either side, get them out on the table and fix them. This is a soft skill, it's a people skill, right? And if it's related to competence, whose responsibility is it to engender and develop competence? I think that's a shared duty too. So I'll bring that into the conversation as well. And again, I have to sort of restrain myself because there's so many different thread counts on this as well. But I thought I would add those couple things in after you shared a few moments ago, Todd.
Yeah, no, thank you. That I appreciate those. Just wanted to give a quick shout out. This is Caesar Alcazar. Just wanted to say he was enjoying the comments. Thanks for coming on the show, Caesar. Great to have you on. Yeah, with childcare, we didn't even bring that up as an issue, but certainly a major concern for those with families. Yeah,
absolutely. Because here's the thing. Childcare, if you have dependents, you should not have to make the choice between your identity being what you're doing and who you are doing it for. Most people, when they have dependents, they're doing it for not just themselves, they're doing it for their dependents, which usually are some sort of a committed relationship, and kids, grandkids, or both, right? Why should we have to make people make a choice? This should not have to be something that's mandated from the top down, because I'm not here to, but this is again more my historian hat on. Centralization tends to work in the short term, but it breaks down in the long term. Let the small units, or as Sir Edmund Burke said many centuries ago, the little platoons. The little platoons could be the workplaces that only have a handful of people. And the vast majority of entrepreneurship is still that way, especially in America. I can't speak to the other G20 nations. I can't speak to the other 175 or so nations as well. But I can say this, the little platoons, the decentralization is better. So if you are looking at corporate real estate or leasing, and it's like, oh my goodness, I don't need all this space anymore. How about negotiate with your leasing agent, with your broker, with your banker, and let's redeploy this. And even if you don't have enough use for it for your own staff, childcare, for example, what about businesses nearby? Sublease it out, right?
Mhm.
There's so many cool, creative, counterintuitive things you can do, but stop making it about going back to an era that is gone. This would be like me saying, I have a Betamax tape for you. Would you like to play it? And you're like, what's a Betamax? Well, if you're a certain age, you know what that is. But most people are like, I'm going to have to look that up on my search engine. I have no idea what a Betamax is.
I'm sorry, SJ. I only have a video disc player.
Right. So bottom line is why are we doing this to our organizations and our workplaces, let alone even certain households? Why are we forcing people to do things the way that it was versus the way it could be? It's all in the mind, and it's all then translating it to kinetic or kinesthetic action. So there you go.
So I'd like in the time we have left to pivot and talk a little bit more about community building and sort of its place with the future of work. And we've been talking about a lot of current trends, but I think these are signals from the future to an extent of the ways that we're rethinking the workplace, the unique pressures we have on us now, all organizations are dealing with. I think about like how it's going to get harder to convince people to come and work for a company as opposed to being, a solo agent, a free agent, on their own, whether it's as a freelancer, as a consultant, as an advisor, as a fractional. We've got these new categories of employment coming about. And I think about like some of the work that I'm doing, I've become very interested in not just communities of practice, which I think as you think about like someone who is developing professionally may join a community for CPAs or for product managers or to hone their abilities and to I forget the term Wenger uses to sort of surface the unspoken cultural norms of a particular profession, and help people be brought into those spaces together. I'm very interested in communities of practice, but I've also become very interested in something that I haven't heard a bunch of people talking about except as a nomenclature, and that's communities of talent. As I've been doing more work in this space in the past couple of years, I feel like I've come full circle in my career, having spent about the first 14, 15 years of my professional life as a tech recruiter, working in agencies and as a third party, headhunter, so to speak. And then for the past 10 plus years, having been specifically in the online community building space, in the last 2 years, I kind of came back to this idea of, that whole process of hiring, of people coming into a company, of getting committed to joining an organization. It hasn't gotten any better in the 10 years plus since I was doing recruiting work. In fact, it seems like it's gone backwards, and technology has not necessarily helped that process get any better. I'm wondering what your thoughts are about sort of what you see as sort of that future state, and maybe how communities might have an impact. I certainly have opinions on it, but you're my guest. And I want to hear from you about that.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I don't know if I'd call this a softball. This might be the equivalent of a slider for those who understand baseball. But I will do my best to address it because I think it's a very important thing. First of all, I think technology in and of itself, and if I put my education Sherpa hat back on, I think one of the big issues that I see in that sector is people are putting too many eggs in the ed tech basket. Just add technology and it'll fix everything. Won't happen. It's more akin to a handful of Band-Aids on a patient that needs a lot of stitches, okay, or needs a transfusion or needs a transplant or something. You see what I'm saying? So the first thing is technology in and of itself is fine, but if you think that's going to solve everything under the hood, it's not, okay? Because here's the thing, there's so many human dynamics going on. There's demographic stuff you have to consider. There's psychographic stuff you got to consider. Sociological, anthropological, psychological, philosophical. We'd be here all day. Okay. So now when you bring in communities, I'm going to briefly follow my Collins model again and zoom out for a minute. When I first heard about communities in the context of entrepreneurship, business, it was from my very first mentor who I met over 14 years ago. He had me listen to a talk given by one Mr. Michael Dell, who most people might know was the brains behind Dell Computers. And yes, they still exist because Elon Musk just recently gave them a partial contract to help with his Grok project, okay, in Tennessee, which is an American state. So trust me, Dell still exists. And Michael Dell was just shouted out by Elon Musk. So Dell was talking about community is the most important thing in online business because you can have all the content you want, whatever it is, physical products, services that are productized. You can have the commerce system in place, whether you take Bitcoin payment, or you take credit cards, debit cards, e-checks, or this archaic monster that won't go away called an ACH. Okay. By the way, it's about 50 years old. Suffice to say, you can have all the commerce you want. But what matters is the community. If you don't have some retention, some ability to upsell them, some ability to serve them, client service, member service, customer service, you're just going to have to keep regenerating people. So content and commerce in and of themselves aren't the answer. Community. So that's when I first heard about it. Now let's zoom back in. Lots of cool platforms out there. So if you are a fully distributed team, if you have a hybrid model, staff choice, which is what I recommend. If you want to go hybrid, let the staff have the choice of what days they come in. Okay. Do not mandate it, please. Mandates don't work. Okay. They might work short term, but all you're going to do is engender resentment, dissatisfaction, frustration that's below the surface. So don't do it. Okay. Give them the choice. Keep them engaged with a community platform. The ones that I'm the most familiar with, and I know there's plenty of others. So if you're listening now or you're listening in the future, I'm happy to learn about more because remember, I'm a futurist, but I can't track everything. It's impossible. There's startups and lifestyle businesses all over the place.
Way too many signals to track. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Slack is pretty well known. I'm a member of 9 Slack workplaces, some of which are more active than I can possibly keep up with. Another one is Mighty Networks. I'm a member of, I think, 5 Mighty Networks. That's another one. There's also Circle, which has a lot of similarity to Facebook, because Facebook never really made the full transition from being a B2C solution to being B2B. They tried, but I don't think they ever did it.
I think they actually just recently mothballed their workplace product.
And I think that was a smart play because, number one, they're already starting to get aged out because TikTok and other platforms are blowing them away anyway. So that's a whole other discussion for a social media person. I'll just give you my quick thought when it comes to communities, right? So that's 3. And there are a few others out there. And again, I'm probably forgetting some. But here's the thing. Use these communities for talent from a professional B2B standpoint is very possible because I'm a member of a few independent workforce communities that are using Slack and are using mining networks and are using other platforms that I'm forgetting right now. So that's perfectly possible, because when communities were first envisioned, you're thinking about a website community, maybe that you dripped out or had a funnel for some sort of product or service, right? And that's where Dell was talking about in the 1990s, late 90s. But then, of course, the earliest social media, LinkedIn, is now 21 years old. It still has groups, but the groups just don't seem to get the traction. I'm a part of LinkedIn groups, but whatever.
I barely pay any attention to them, honestly, because I maintain that in any of the large social platforms, while yes, it's certainly possible that you could create a thriving community, the effort required to build your knitting circle in the middle of a loud, flashy gambling den is not likely. Like you're surrounded by distractions in any of the large community platform or any of the large social media platforms.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that's why, with all respect to the people out there who are still on Meta's Facebook and are part of their groups, I left Facebook behind, personal choice, because I believed as a futurist, it was already in the past. It had its heyday. Its heyday was roughly 2008 to 12, give or take. Okay. And some people might disagree with me, and that's fine, because guess what? Civil discourse is a beautiful thing. But that's why I focus on those particular three, Todd, and I know there's others out there. Contact me, book some time, we'll talk through others. But that's the thing about communities, is they can be talent-based, which is more of a B2B construct. You can unite consultants together. You can unite freelancers together. Or, of course, you and I are part of a Slack channel that's dedicated to fractionals.
Yes, right? Fractionalsunited.com. Yeah, right.
Fantastic place.
Yep.
Karina has done a beautiful job with that. So I'll stop the comments there, because, again, there's so many different angles we can go, but I know I want to make sure we get through anything else that you had on your mind, and how I can serve best here.
Yeah, well, I think I just wanted to mention, as you said, there's several of these kinds of community spaces that we belong to that are maybe signals of things to come, where we may see a little more evenly distributed. The future being a little more evenly distributed. It's already with us. I think I'm alluding to maybe a Bruce Sterling statement about it, but Fractionals United is an example of that, of executive leaders who don't want to go back to full-time corporate jobs for the most part, but they want to be engaged in fractional employment as an approach, and the community that enables them to professionally grow and to build their own book of business around that and be able to live their professional lives on their own terms. Very important. Another one that I recently joined and belong to is runpollen.com, which is for independent consultants. Great set of resources for people to do that kind of work. I was involved with planning. We didn't get off the ground, but I think another community of talent was one that I worked on that was supposed to be geographically based in the southeastern Wisconsin market. And it was designed for professionals of color to reduce the wealth gap and to dispel the myth that there weren't enough diverse hires within that region. And it was a sponsored community by a series of area employers. Unfortunately, it never got off the ground, but it was a great idea. And I think another example in the wild of where these things exist, and they are starting to become a little more visible overall. And I'm very excited about that. So I just wanted to give people a couple of practical examples of what some of these things may look like as future of work impacting communities that are out there. SJ, I know we're getting really low on time here. I wanted to ask you one last question about this as we start thinking about likely future scenarios versus utopian versus dystopian. What do you see as the ways that that the community is going to maybe have impacts for good or for ill going forward? You have some thoughts about what what things we should be attuned to or looking for on the horizon as we enter the next 5-10 years of life in the professional workplace?
Oh, that might be a knuckleball from
Sorry.
that that might be a knuckleball. And again, these are baseball terminology, so bear with me, folks. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, which is an American state, and I was raised on baseball by my father, so bear with me. Okay, great question, though, all the same. I love questions that are thinking questions. I love the utopian dystopian thing. That was good. I'll hang my hat on that for a moment. I know, again, we are limited on time. Utopian is that side of it says that, again, technology will cure all ills. But I remember hearing when I was still in university that, and it was a speaker talking, and again, I'm like an early 20-something, right? So I had so much ramp in front of me, and it didn't make as much sense to me back then as it does now in my late 40s. And that is, technology can be both a benefactor and a beast. Okay. Case in point, we just had that, what was it called? CrowdStrike. Knocked everything out a week or so ago. Mm-hmm. So on the utopian side, do not put all your eggs in the technology basket. Social capital, humanness matters. Now, this is coming from someone who by choice, even though the COVID era is in our rear view, it's an endemic now, in my view, than a pandemic, but that's, again, come to your own conclusions. But suffice to say, 98% of the time, I am remote, and that's by choice. I keep my co-working membership. I go there once in a while, but it's usually by myself. I'm not meeting people, right? My startup contract that I made reference to earlier, I do one event every quarter, and that is about the 2%. So maybe it's 96%. The point being heavy virtual. But I still wholeheartedly believe in social capital is a humanist thing. Understand that the book Bowling Alone by Putnam does not have to be the reality. We don't have to continue to be disassociated. That's where the dystopian comes in, is everyone is on their own. No one can be a part of anything bigger than themselves. Absolutely not. We don't want echo chambers. This is closer to dystopian. We do not want cult-like behavior, mass movement psychosis. Please stay away from all that. I am not a psychologist. I'm not an anthropologist. I'm not a sociologist. But what I am is someone who is a possibility thinker. But I also know that humans throughout all of millennia do fall for this kind of stuff. It's just how we're wired, and we do have these issues. The lizard brain, the limbic versus the neocortex. So that's dystopian side. Utopian side is technology will fix it all. Find something that is closer on the continuum to utopian. But as I learned from a former candidate for vice president, although he got most of his renown from being in Vietnam, James Stockdale, it got named after the Stockdale paradox, which is you face the issue as it is right now with warts and all, but you still have the mindset that it will be better. That is my guiding star on this, is using the Stockdale paradox. So that's how I would answer that. Allow communities to flourish and develop, Burke's little platoons, decentralization, but do not forget that being in association with fellow humans is a hugely important thing. So we'll leave it there.
And I think it's a wonderful message to end on, SJ. I truly appreciate the insights of that. It definitely resonates with me, where we've got this potential that, technology as a magnifier of the best and the worst of us, has, it can go either way, and it depends on where we put our effort and our attention and intentionality. And that really comes down to doing our best to focus on the human side of things, and connection and building positive associations. SJ, as we kind of wrap up here, if someone wants to work with you, wants to engage you further, what's the best way to go about doing that?
Thank you for the opportunity. This would be the equivalent of a T-ball game, right? Hit the ball off the tee. I love these analogies, folks. Hey, I believe in bringing levity to any conversation because we hit some pretty deep stuff today. So I'm going to bring a little levity.
We absolutely did. Yes.
So how do they do it? Well, as a futurist, I have left most of the Web 2.0 social platforms behind because they were centralized. And I believe the future is decentralization. I believe the future is what I just said. So, but I did keep one beachhead left because you can't completely leave where the masses are. So LinkedIn is the first. If you look me up under SJ Barakony, SJ is my name, not initials. Barakony is a pretty unique last name. It's Hungarian for those who are into that thing of understanding what's the origin, right? National origin. You're not going to find any other SJ Barakonys out there unless someone has spoofed my profile. So that's the first way. On my profile, I do have a link, or if you don't like LinkedIn, I can still get it to you. I have a booking platform, a digital calendar. So that's another way to reach me. And then I have a landing page, which is, I believe, a little bit of a skinny down version of a whole website. But since I'm nomadic, I decided to have something that's a little bit more smaller. So to those out there who still love websites and such, I'm not saying I'm anti-website. I just chose not to have one. So I have a landing page instead. So those are my top three: LinkedIn Direct, booking, calendar, digital platform, and then lastly is my landing page. So that's how you would connect with me, reach out to me. And I thank you for the opportunity to share those.
SJ, it's the pleasure's been all mine. Wonderful conversation. Would love to have you back again anytime to talk about this or more, and or to delve a little more deeply. And for those of you who stuck with us through the live stream, as well as who are catching this on the replay, love the comments. There was a couple that we didn't get a chance to get to. Somebody mentioned communities of mission. I want to delve into that a little further. And if you reply to anything either up on YouTube or on LinkedIn here, we'll definitely jump in and keep the conversation going that way. Appreciate you. Would ask if you valued this conversation today, please share the stream, talk about it in a post, give us a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel. All of those are great. Just a quick reminder: the next installment of Talk About Your Community is going to be on Friday, August 9th, and I'm going to be joined by Josh Fairfield, and he's a academic and lawyer, thinks and writes a lot about online communities. We're going to be talking about extended reality, XR, and online communities, and some of the potential there for what that entails, what that implies, or augurs for the future of community building, keeping up with this theme of the future of work, future of online communities. Until then, please be good to yourselves and take some time, and we will be back here in a couple of weeks for the next event. Have a great day. Kalisa, let's roll the credits. Thanks, SJ.